non-1 to win the title, who would your first, like if we had a draft of non-number 1 seeds in this projection, who would you pick to win the championship? So you can't pick Purdue, you can't pick UConn, you can't pick Arizona, and you can't pick Houston. Who would your first draft pick be? That's like an impossible question for me right now.
That is, it's a great one though.
Duke would be. I don't know if Duke would be the number 1 pick, but they might be, and that's why I bring it up. Who would how about I give you the first pick? Not a 1 seed drafting to win the national title. Who's the first pick?
Duke would be my number 2 pick. My number 1 would be Tennessee. That'd be my number 1.
I think North Carolina would be my number 1, but it would be really close. And and I'll bring up another team that could be the number 1 by the end of the year. There's actually a chance Baylor would be my number 1 when we get to the end of the year for non-1 seed. It's like really weird how this profile has changed for them. Like I have all their stuff up right now, and I go, yeah, like they're not there yet, but man, they're really close. Like some of the defensive numbers just have to get like a little bit better, not a lot better. It's like actually not that bad. They just have to get like a little bit better, and they're almost a winner then. There's like kind of nothing stopping that. And that is so that really surprises me. I don't think they're going to win.
Same.
But I think a 1's going to win. But if we're like non-1s, man, like Baylor or North Carolina right now, and then maybe Duke. I guess that would be my order. I'll say North Carolina would be my number 1 pick right now.
I say Tennessee just because we know the defense would be there. And I think
man, you're hooked on this team. This is going to end so badly for you. This is going to be tough for you this year. Like you're hooked on Tennessee. Who gets hooked on Tennessee? They're like the easiest one to get away from.
I know better. Yeah, I know better. I know.
What about Marquette?
I do like Duke.
Why wouldn't Marquette be the first pick for you? They'd be my next. They'd be like number 4 for me right now, probably.
I don't like Kolek in big games. I've just watched enough, and I like him a lot. I've just watched Tyler Kolek in enough big games to know that I can't get there. See, Tennessee, that's the thing. Connect, we really haven't seen him in big games, but he's one of the guys that I trust. Like game on the line, he can will his team to a victory. Duke's interesting, man. Like they got a senior point guard in Roach. Filipowski's a pro. Proctor's a pro. I mean, the freshman that they got's really good. And again, like this is the time of the year, Shire's team 2 years in a row, like they start to play really well. North Carolina, like I get it. I get why you like them. They're probably going to have the ACC player of the year in RJ Davis. Baycott's been there forever. The transfers that they brought in, they can shoot. They defended so well in December and January. Like there was no way that could keep that up, but they're still really good defensively. It actually dropped off a little offensively. But like, what do we do with Hubert Davis, Ken? I mean, the guy makes the title in his first year, should have won it all. Then he becomes the first coach of a team ever to be a preseason number 1 and not even make the tournament. And it's kind of like the Kevin Ali thing. It's like what is this guy? You win the title in your first year, you come back, and then we realize that like you can't coach. And I don't think Hubert Davis is that. It's like we got one extreme on each end, and I don't know like what the middle is with Hubert. And that's what kind of worries me about Carolina.
So like the last 10 years, 3 teams won their conference tournament that won the national championship. The last 10. Yeah. But then if you go the previous 10, it's like 6. So it's like, again, like you're kind of, but I think the way to frame that for people is kind of what we're saying about the February, like the last month thing. Just don't get too wrapped up in what you saw. Like, Georgetown and Patrick Ewing made that crazy run, what was that, 3-4 years ago in the Big East tournament, won all those games, and ended up making the terrible team, made the NCAA tournament. They got in a 12-5 against Colorado. I think people were kind of like, no, George, I just saw them. They were won the Big East like pretty good. It's like, nah, like that's not, it's almost like it's got to be a reset button. Whenever you get to the first day of the NCAA tournament, it's got to be like reset, and you go back to the entire body of work again. And I would put more of an emphasis on non-conference play than conference play too. But there's no recency. There's no hot team. It's like everybody's got a bunch of days off and they're planning for their next opponent. And you're in Boise, Idaho in a gym you've never played in. And here we go. And you just play the games. So it's it's got to be, you have to hard reset your brain to be like, not how did I just feel about this team when I was at Madison Square Garden watching them, or wherever, or Nashville, or wherever they play the SEC tournament now, or in Vegas. Like, it's got to be how have they been the whole year? And you want someone balanced and complete, and you don't want somebody that's just been really good for a couple weeks. If you want to bet into this market, like you want me to say no, like you want me to say like fade them, bet these 100 to 1s, and we all get rich. It just doesn't. This late in the season, it usually just doesn't go that way. And even UConn last year, because you'd be like, well, UConn last year was like 25 to 1, 30 to 1. Be like, yeah, that's like as good as it ever gets. And they were like 5th in KenPom entering the tournament or something, some preposterously high number. So like that's not even an underdog. That's not even a long shot. It's like the 5th ranked team in the country won the tournament, something like that. Last year, they were 4th entering the tournament in efficiency margin. So really, like, one of the best teams did win last year, even if they're a 4 seed and the price was a little longer. They still, one of the best teams won. The Creighton loss, to your question, it hurts as much as a loss can hurt, but, responded and blew out Villanova the following weekend. And I think they're going to be fine. What I said last week too, like they're on more of a knife edge because I'm going to compare them to last year's team when I make a decision about whether to bet them or not. And if they pass this test of like playing through the regular season and the Big East tournament, and they are able to put together a profile that's as good or better than last year's team, then I'm in. And Florida, this was the same thing when they won back-to-back. Like, you don't, like, the team you field can't be a worse version than last year's, and you just win. There's just, the history bears that out. You have to at least be as good as you were the previous year to win the NCAA tournament as a rule. And UConn's, they're doing it right now. They are just as good, if not better, than they were last year. The players have changed, but the NBA talent is still there. The depth is still there. The performance is still there. So for now, all good. But, if we get, they got a really, really interesting rematch game with Marquette coming up pretty soon, where Marquette's going to be like probably hoping that it goes a lot better than the game I guess that was in Hartford when they played a couple weeks ago. So like there's ways it can still go down for them. But for me, it's like entering, if it looked like it looks right now, entering the tournament, everything, like let's say we just started the NCAA tournament tomorrow, which would be amazing for a lot of reasons, then UConn would be the most likely team to win for me by a pretty good margin, with Houston and Arizona kind of alongside them, but not quite as good. And again, like that really closely mirrors the market, that even the one that you see on the screen right now, if you're watching on Stadium, like the market kind of has that way too. So it doesn't make it the best. Look, there'll be a lot of games to bet, regions. We don't know what the paths are going to be. Things can get shaken up here, but just like this isn't great right now. Like the way this is going, you almost you'd want UConn to stumble a little. Like it's almost like what creates a betting opportunity. People got to get off some of these teams. Like something's got to, like Arizona's got to take a dive here a little bit, almost, to use like a boxing term. Like they got to phantom punch. Like let's lose it. Let's drop a couple and get people off this. So the price is still good. Just like that's kind of where I'm at with UConn right now.
Of all the regions that we have done, of all the different brackets, I think this draw for Houston is fantastic for them. Fantastic. Because when we talked about 2 weeks ago, the kind of teams that can give Houston trouble, it's the teams that can hit threes. It's the teams that can score. And I mean, it's the teams that aren't like afraid of them. It's not afraid of their physicality. And I look at these 8-9 games, like Mississippi State would be the 8 seed that would absolutely be the perfect draw for Houston.
Yeah,
Nebraska, same kind of. Yeah. Oh man, exactly. Same kind of thing. San Diego State, again, it's like in college football when teams go up against Bama and Georgia and they try to like out physical Bama and Georgia and like you try and beat them at their own game. That's what San Diego State would try and do to Houston. And although they're really good at that, like nobody's better than Houston. So I think that's a bad matchup. It's interesting in the bottom half of the region because of how lethal those offenses are when you're talking Duke, Florida, New Mexico, Marquette, BYU, some of these teams. It could potentially get intriguing in the Elite Eight, but man, I think that's a great draw for Houston going to the Elite Eight. And then the bottom half of the region is really interesting. We can get into some of those teams. My question though, Ken, I teased it at the beginning of the show. We did not discuss this last time with Houston. I think it's something worth talking about. I think so many years with Gonzaga, even though they made it to 8 straight Sweet 16s, I think one of the things that really hurts them year after year after year is the conference that they play in, right? They aren't getting battle tested on a nightly basis like a lot of these other teams are. The fact that Houston is now in the Big 12 and they're no longer in the American and they're playing good team after good team night after night after night, we both agree, like this Houston team, it just kind of feels like the same thing. But then does that make them feel differently because they look like the same team going up against the Big 12 every single night? We didn't talk about that last time, but I think it's interesting now with Houston being in the Big 12.